Gonna give a countdown and go 3, 2, 1, then go.
Yes. And I won't say the
Good evening. Had a schedule conflict, declined to participate, or didn't respond to our outreach efforts. Tonight's candidates are here to highlight his campaign and proposals and answer questions related to our community. For tonight's event, there will be an opening statement, questions, a short break to learn more about the Urban League of Portland, more questions, and a closing statement. Although we hope the forum will be exciting and informative event, we also want it to be an orderly and respectful one. All defamatory, abusive, profane, threatening, offensive, or hate speech are strictly prohibited. Candidates that engage in this behavior will be removed from the forum. Here are a few ground rules for the candidate. Please remain muted if you are not answering a question. This is important for audio issues as well as video focus. Please do not forget this. The candidates will have 2 minutes for their opening statement. We will ask you to deliver your opening statement directly. When questions are asked, the candidate will have 4 minutes to respond. 3 minutes to respond. And with a short break, time permitting. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer their question. After the questions are complete, candidates will have 2 minutes to deliver a closing statement. We will ask you to deliver your closing statement at that time. Please be courteous and conscientious throughout the forum when speaking. If you are within 30 seconds of your allotted time, staff will send you a notification. If you go over time, we will send you a chat at all to let you know the time is up. If you persist in going over time, you will be muted. Okay, so we will begin with opening statements. When called upon, you have 2 minutes to introduce yourself. Senator Linthicum, your time begins now.
Thank you. It's a great opportunity to have this conversation, and I look forward to the evening together. I'm currently a state senator. My name is Dennis Linthicum. I'm currently a state senator in the southern central part of Oregon. And I'm running for the office of Secretary of State because our state is frankly at a crossroads. My wife, Diane, and I have had the privilege of living in Klamath County for over 3 decades. And during that time, we have been deeply involved in Oregon, in agriculture, in forestry, land use, and those kinds of things. And our children are now building their lives with their families here in the Pacific Northwest as well. I earned a BA in economics from UCLA and followed that with a master's degree from Biola University. And my career has been basically in the private sector at the forefront of cutting edge technology, software development, database management, and those types of enterprises. And whether in California or Oregon, I've been in these sectors where technology is important. I was at a semiconductor and microcircuit manufacturing facility in California. I was at a financial research and portfolio management firm in California. Here in Oregon, I did front-end work and GUI development for JELD-WIN and their global employee management system. It's known as GEM. And I've spent my life engineering solutions in a world where truth, precision, and accountability matter. So my entry into politics and running for this seat is just kind of a natural progression. The Secretary of State is the chief auditor for the state, is the chief elections person responsible for election integrity.
Thank you, Senator Linthicum. Treasurer Reed, your time begins now. You're muted, Treasurer Reed.
See, I trusted your instructions earlier to pay attention to auditing. Thank you, Justice, and thank you, friends, for this opportunity to talk about a really important race that comes at a really important time. I'm running for Secretary of State because I think this is a terrific state in which we should feel very lucky about the fact that we get to live here. We have done a whole lot to make it convenient for people to vote and done a whole lot to make sure that our elections are secure, inclusive, and fair. But we can't make the mistake of thinking that those achievements are automatic. And I want to make sure that we are defending the way that we do elections in Oregon, making sure that people have confidence in the way we conduct our elections, and making it easy for people to participate. In addition to that, Secretary of State, as you've already heard, is the auditor, and I want to make sure that that Oregonians have confidence in the way our tax dollars are spent. You have 7+ years of data on me as your state treasurer. And while people sometimes say there hasn't been a lot of drama at the Treasury, I think that's a plus, because what we're about at Treasury is stability, professionalism, and delivering results. And that's the approach I want to bring to the Secretary of State's office. So I'm looking forward to the conversation tonight and appreciate the opportunity. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. We will now begin the question portion of our forum. You will have 3 minutes to respond to each question. Question 1, in your own words, describe what you see as the core roles of the Secretary of State's office, and what is your vision for implementing those responsibilities? Treasurer Reed, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks. I think there are 4 key responsibilities that the Secretary of State's office has. The first and probably most well known is elections. I'll come back and talk about each of them individually. The second is auditing. The third is the corporation division. The fourth is archives. Undoubtedly, the one that gets the most attention and is certainly under the most scrutiny right now is our elections. That's at the very center of our democracy, and we have some significant advantages in Oregon that I think people like. The fact that Oregon 25 years ago became the first state in the country to conduct our elections by mail at home has given people more opportunity to participate. We have to make sure that we are holding those processes to the highest scrutiny, and yet making sure that everyone who is eligible to vote gets that opportunity. I have the strong belief that we are better as a state when more people are participating and when they have confidence in the processes that are part of elections. Making it easier for people to fit that process into complicated lives is better for our state. Audits need to be driven not by political agendas or predetermined outcomes, but by realistic assessments of risk, so that people have confidence that our tax dollars are being spent efficiently and effectively, that programs and agencies are doing what they're supposed to do. The corporation division is where every Oregon business has to register to legally do business in Oregon, and we have an opportunity to make that process easier, so the next great Oregon entrepreneur can get their business started. The Oregon businesses who are trying to do the right thing and hire more people have an easier time doing that. And the archives is an important way that we can tell the story of Oregon, but that needs to include the parts of the story that happened before we called this place Oregon, and the story needs to reflect everyone's lived experience in this state that's so special to us. The Secretary of State has a workforce of about 200 that is very similar to the size of the Treasury that I've been managing successfully for almost 8 years now. So setting that culture of accountability, of results, and responsiveness, I think overlays all of the specific responsibilities. And I want to bring the experience, the professionalism, and the stability that we've built at the Treasury to the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Lincecum, you have 3 minutes. Pardon me, Senator, you're muted. Okay.
As mentioned, there are 4 essential services for the Secretary of State's office. It oversees, I think, the primary item on the Secretary of State's to-do list is overseeing elections and ensuring election integrity. I think this is a duty that has suffered under the prevailing single-party mindset within the Secretary of State's office. And repairing this tarnished image is a primary focus of mine, as public perception and trust in the electoral process has been severely impacted by these issues. Whether they're real or not is not up to me to decide, but it's up to transparency, investigations, and accountability. We simply need to share with the public. When the public has concerns, we need to catalog those concerns and ensure the transparency for the trust in the electoral process. The genuine empathy of divergent perspectives is frankly lacking from the majority party's control of all the major executive offices and the executive agencies. This needs to be corrected to ensure fair and open access for all voters, and it needs to be corrected for responsible auditing of the executive branch offices. The auditing function is a proficiency test for the executive agencies, like proficiency standards for high school graduates that are missing today. Audits provide a metric to measure performance and identify areas that might need improvement or where monies are being spent wisely, accurately, and timely. So these comprehensive audits are necessary to enhance departmental efficiency and service, and this information should also be available widely for public consumption. Let's see, the last 2 items that I'd refer to is the Sustainability Board and the Land Use Board. It's one of 3 persons on the Land Use Council and one of several appointed persons coming from the governor's office on the Sustainability Board. And these are also important. I and my family, my kids were raised off the grid. I've lived off the grid. In other words, no power line comes from Pacific Power into our home, but we have been living off the grid in one of the most sustainable environments anybody could imagine and profit from. And so I think I bring a wide range to the community.
Thank you, Senator. Question 2. A measure on November's ballot will institute ranked choice voting, a voting system already used in several cities and counties within Oregon for several statewide and federal elections in the year 2028. If this measure passes, how will you use the Office of Secretary of State to ensure counties, election clerks, and all Oregonians are prepared for a smooth implementation of ranked choice voting? Senator Lincecum, your time begins now.
Thank you. Ranked choice voting is one of those difficult things. I actually think it will be determined to be unconstitutional. There's an Oregon revised statute that makes a clear point that all ballots must be tallied at the precinct level. And it's not quite fathomable how you can tally all of these ranked choices across all the precincts within a given district for a given measure, whether it's a city council measure or a statewide race like the one we're discussing today or others. So that's an interesting point. If you look at the city ballot for the city of Portland, it's got all of these individuals in columns and in rows. And quite frankly, I think this is a harder ballot than choosing the individual you think would be the best leader for your city or urban area or district, congressional district, or statewide office like the Secretary of State. So, but nevertheless, the charter for the Secretary of State would be to implement software to categorize, rank, summarize, and add all of the elections and the services that would be available for the people to be, quote, choosing from and ranking in order of preference. It's a very difficult system to implement. And I think I certainly have the background to do it. I've been a database and information system processor for years, and it will be a great challenge to bring individuals into the skill set that can service the people of Oregon and help them make the distinctions they want to make within the choices they have before them.
Thank you, Senator Linthicum. Treasurer Reed, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks for the good question. Before I answer that, I do want to go back for just a moment to something the Senator said earlier in his description of the responsibilities of the Secretary of State. We talked about voter integrity. That's relevant to this question and to the previous one. And I heard him say it's not up to him to determine whether voter integrity is in play. And I appreciated that, but I can't help but notice, and I think it's important for people who are listening here to know that the senator was a participant, a leader, in fact, in a lawsuit that sought to overturn the way we do mail-in voting in Oregon. And I think that represents a really significant contrast in our values. I think we're better off when people are able to participate in a way that is convenient and upholds high standards. There's a lot to like about the ranked choice voting process and proposal that's in front of voters because I think it has the potential of allowing people to more closely represent the nuances of their positions on the ballot. And when people feel that way, I think they're more likely to participate in our elections. And as I said, that's a really core value for me. I think we're stronger, we're more resilient, we're more capable when more people are participating and feeling the confidence that comes with that. Now, I've had conversations with about 25 of the 36 county clerks across the state, and something really interesting emerged quickly as those conversations got underway. I didn't have to bring up ranked choice voting in any of those conversations to ask for the clerks' opinions because they brought it up with me. Each of them was committed, of course, to carrying out the will of voters, but they all expressed significant concern about the adequacy of time and resources that would be required to engage in a really solid implementation. And I think however we might feel about this proposal, we can agree that the worst possible outcome would be the passage of the measure if it's followed by a poor implementation. Because as excited as people might be about the prospects of this process, we would do real damage to people's confidence if we followed passage with bad implementation. So that's why I think the experience I've had as treasurer is really relevant here. The experience I've had turning concepts into actual results, the kinds of things that no one else had done. We brought the country's first opt-out retirement plan to Oregon that now has 130,000 people with funded retirement accounts to the tune of $300 million. That took specific, diligent, persistent implementation, working with individual savers and employers and all kinds of detailed work to make sure that it came off well and was a good experience for people who are participating and facilitating it. That's the approach that I will bring to this process so that we can have a confidence building exercise that voters will feel good about.
Thank you. Treasurer Reed, give me a moment. Question 3. To eliminate the influence of money on elections, in 2016, Portland implemented the Small Donor Elections Program, which encourages candidates to build large donor bases instead of relying on smaller pools of wealthier donors. The program has been successful and has led to more diverse and representative candidates for city offices. If elected as Secretary of State, would you support publicly funded elections? Treasurer Reed, we will begin with you.
Well, let's start with values here. I think most people would agree with the idea that it would be a positive development if we decrease the influence of money in politics. And that's why I'm glad that the legislature passed campaign finance reform and established limits. Whoever is elected Secretary of State is going to face a significant task in implementing those reforms. And I had a conversation just today about how complex and challenging that is going to be. So that's going to be my focus, because that's the job that's in front of the next Secretary of State. I'm open to conversations about other ways to continue that movement, but I am wary of taking on too much all at once. It is going to be a significant effort to implement the reforms, the regulations that the legislature passed. As evidence, you can see the decision that the legislature made recently to add significant capacity in terms of positions to the Secretary of State's office. This, again, I think is one of the reasons that I'm a good fit for this office, because of the experience we've had at Treasury implementing significant new programs, managing a portfolio of $140 billion with very good results, making sure that those pieces of follow-up are done. We might also be facing the implementation of ranked choice voting, as we just talked about. So I'm definitely interested in conversations that reduce the influence of money and allow more diverse candidates, a wider selection of people presenting ideas to voters. But I know that the Secretary of State's office is going to have its hands full implementing the existing campaign finance reform that were passed by the legislature. And I want to make sure that goes really well, because, again, I think positive intentions can really founder on bad implementation. I want to do everything to make sure that we are avoiding a bad implementation to follow the passage of those reforms.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. Senator Linthicum, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. As can be seen on the homepage for the Secretary of State, the office is pledged to support integrity grounded in transparency, accountability, and fairness. I would stress that these 3 principles require follow-up and improvement within the office of the Secretary of State. And implementing a campaign finance reform is an issue that is extremely relevant to transparency and openness, and it needs to be addressed. With regard to the treasurer's reference to my lawsuit was initiated because there wasn't transparency. Remember, we actually requested ballot images from Jackson County, and the county clerk told us that they could provide those images if we would provide them with a check for $982,986.17. So this is an issue directly related to campaign finance, money. Where is it going? How is it spent? What would Jackson County do with the $1 million that I sent them? And what they would do is they would hire individuals to look at the ballot images. And the individuals like myself who were requesting the ballot images are somehow bad guys, while the people that they hire to look at the images are somehow good guys. This is an artificial and capricious designation between what is good and what is bad. In the legislation for campaign finance reform, the legislature categorized 8 different types of committees and a whole variety of different individuals who can give more than other individuals. This is entirely unfair from the word go. And in terms of a flat playing field, a level playing field, a field where everybody can be assured that their voice gets heard, the campaign finance reform that was passed by the legislature is not that. Now, as my Secretary of State position, when I take that office, I'm a software developer. I know exactly how to implement the categories. A table-driven database system would be easily categorize every transaction and every issue so that the people can see where the money's going and where it came from. That doesn't mean that it was implemented in a proper fashion.
Thank you, Senator. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the Urban League of Portland. Led by President and CEO Kenge Harmon Johnson, the Urban League of Portland is one of the oldest Black-serving nonprofit organizations in Oregon. Our mission is to empower African Americans and others to achieve equality in education, employment, health, economic security, and quality of life. In areas that deeply affect the social and economic conditions of Black families and communities, it is important that our voices are heard and that they matter to decision makers. Our programs are our values in action. They help us activate civic empowerment, navigate through complicated systems, and support healthy outcomes for the communities we serve. For example, on Thursday, October 3rd at 5 p.m. for the first time, the Urban League will host their Equal Opportunity Day Awards dinner at the Portland Art Museum. They will honor Black and other literary and visual artists. We will hear from President and CEO Kenge Harmon Johnson as she reflects on the substantial growth of services the Urban League provides. Proceeds from the dinner will fund vital Urban League programs in our community, and you can join our movement for justice and equity in Oregon by visiting our website at ulpdx.org. If you are able, I invite you to donate and or become a member, as your support is an investment in our Black community and our robust programming that empowers communities and changes lives. I'd like to highlight the organization that I lead, Reimagine Oregon, which is a public accountability project led by Black leaders committed to dismantling systemic racism by advocating for the advancement of Black-centered policies at all levels of governance, fostering innovation and social justice, and promoting increased economic development and opportunities for Black Oregonians and better collective future for all. The Urban League is a founding member of Reimagine Oregon and its fiscal sponsor. Lastly, tonight's forum is the first in a series of forums that the Urban League will host between now and October 18th. This is an opportunity for viewers to make sure they are ready to vote this November. The deadline to register to vote is October 15th, and you can update your registration or check that your information is accurate by going to OregonVotes.org. That's OregonVotes.org. With that, we're going to return to our next set of questions. You will have 3 minutes again to respond to each question as prior. So question 4, earlier this year, current Secretary of State LaVon Griffin Valade called for more federal money to improve Oregon's election system and voter experiences by upgrading security, hiring more staff, and modernizing equipment. What issues, if any, do you see with Oregon's current election system, and how will you work to improve them? Senator Lincicome, we'll begin with you.
Thank you. The issue that your question's a really broad question, but it's got so many relevant parts to it. I'll pick up on an issue that I think is troubling and needs a better implementation plan. One of the things in terms of upgrading election integrity that the Secretary of State engaged in was artificial intelligence software for misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, known as MDM. And the trouble with artificial intelligence and MDM is, as a software developer, I'm keenly aware that artificial intelligence isn't intelligent. It cannot weigh moral values. It doesn't know in a conversation about appropriate or inappropriate or right or wrong. It only knows about frequencies and statistical evidence. And the statistical evidence doesn't have to be right or wrong. It can just be the evidence. For example, we can see this in our nation's own history. At one time, it was, quote, legal, especially in the Democrat southern states, to own Black people as slaves. Statistically, that's a widely known fact that doesn't make it morally right. And AI cannot determine that. It would simply give an answer that says, hey, it's the law here. And that's not sufficient. Everybody should be outraged at this moral atrocity and be willing to stand up against the political game that's being played when slavery got implemented, got upheld, and got defended by the states at large and by the federal government. The federal government actually never defended slavery, but the individual states did. And so this is a beautiful example of where law doesn't make it right. And you and I ought to be having a conversation about moral authority and right and wrong versus the case of what is or what isn't. And so I think that the issue that you bring up with regard to the Secretary of State and her implementation of artificial intelligence is fraught with problems. And I think we would be better off to undo that and service the First Amendment, which is everybody should have the freedom to speak their mind and speak grievances against the government without the heavy hand of government crushing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Treasurer Reed, you have 3 minutes.
Well, thanks. I want to be really clear about my values here. I think we are much better off as a community, as a state, when more people who are eligible to vote choose to do that. We have done great work in this state to make it convenient for people to vote, to fit the act of voting into their complex and complicated lives. But we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that that's automatic or that it's invulnerable. We can see evidence all over the country of policies being passed that make it harder for people to vote. Of course, we have to uphold high standards and make sure that only people who are eligible to vote are doing so. But we should seek within those constraints to make it as convenient as possible to do so. This, again, is a contrast, I think, between me and the senator. I didn't sue to overturn mail-in voting. That is such an important aspect of how we do elections in Oregon. What I've learned as state treasurer is that despite the honor of serving in that office, I don't have all the answers to the experiences that people have in their daily lives. And one of the things I'm really proud of as treasurer is helping to remake the college savings plan to make it relevant for people who haven't had the tradition of saving for education beyond high school. The way we did that, the way we were successful in doing that, is by asking people, going to communities where we didn't have the kind of relationship that we wanted, asking, and then the really important part, listening. That is the approach I would like to take when it comes to voting, understanding the barriers that may be in the way of people who want to vote. I've learned about really interesting examples from those clerks that I've talked to across the state. I've learned from other secretaries of state. I've learned from communities about opportunities that we might avail ourselves of to make it more convenient for people to vote. Think about voting centers that exist in various communities for people who might have trouble getting to an elections office to deal with an issue that they might have, a ballot that didn't make it to them, a signature that needed to be cured, any range of other issues. It's hard for people sometimes if they have to get to a single election office in a large or challenging community, we can do better at that. We can use the resources that the Secretary of State, the current Secretary of State has secured, and perhaps more from the legislature, to address the physical security that county clerks are facing across the state. That looks different in different communities as well. But all of this, I think, has to come from the core value that we are better when more people are able to vote, when more eligible people have confidence in our systems and choose to exercise their franchise. That's what we're about as Americans and as Oregonians, and that's the value I will uphold.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. Question 5. Well, higher than national trends, Oregon's voter turnout for 2022 was the lowest it has been since 1998. What steps will you take to ensure more Oregonians are informed, empowered, equipped, and enthusiastic to participate in elections? Treasurer Reed, you have 3 minutes.
What an interesting question to follow the last one. I feel like in some ways I talked about some of the content that applies to this question too. I think it's important first to think about what this question actually presupposes and what it's based on. I have a good-natured argument going on with Steve Simon, who is the Secretary of State in Minnesota, and he contends that Minnesota has the highest voter turnout in the country. It's true if you compare that to the percentage of people who are registered to vote. But if you look at the percentage of people who are eligible to vote, Oregon has a higher rate. And I think that's what our goal should be. So I realize that I'm repeating myself to some degree in my answer here relative to the answer to the last question. But I think we can do a lot to make it more convenient for people. I've heard interesting ideas from others that I didn't mention in the last answer, communities and counties in rural settings who have who've taken steps to use city halls across the county that would allow them to have an easier time if they have an issue with a ballot. I think we can do more to assist those counties who are dealing with the costs of special elections. I think there are lots of ways that we're able to build the confidence that voters have in how their ballots are processed. Some counties in other states are using a program of ballot ride-alongs to allow people to accompany a ballot and see the processes, the controls, the procedures that are in place to protect the integrity of those ballots and those votes. All of these things, I think, will give voters more confidence and more desire to participate in what is absolutely the central aspect of the way we conduct elections and conduct our government. And I'm excited to be involved in that and continue to innovate and defend and extend our deserved reputation as being a national leader when it comes to inclusive, secure, fair elections.
Thank you, Treasurer Reed. Senator Linthicum, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. With regard to this question, it's an interesting take to think that voter turnout is low and the state can encourage voter turnout when statistics from Reed College actually describe that 50% of all Republicans within the state of Oregon don't think the election was fair, and nearly 1/3, 32%, just shy of 1/3, thought of all other voters, including Democrats, Independents, Green Party, Constitutional Party, don't think that Oregon's elections are fair. And what this does is this discourages people from voting. Part of the problem, as we see with the latest DMV and passport fiasco coming from the elections integrity side of the fence, where we're registering everybody to vote because, as the treasurer notes, everybody should get the chance to vote. And quite frankly, that's not true. United States citizens and people who have permanent residence in Oregon should get the right to vote, and other people should not have the right to vote. When we open the tin can and let all the worms come out, we see that people are discouraged because they think their vote doesn't count. So the best way to ensure that the people recognize their vote counts is by keeping election integrity at the forefront, keeping transparency at the forefront, shifting resources, and recruiting people who will have an open-minded, open-hearted perspective on what it means to continue our form of self-governing, where we get to maintain this Republican form of governance, where we get to elect local officers, whether it's city council persons or commissioners at the county level, or state representatives or congressional districts. All of these jurisdictional responsibilities and authorities are what we mean by a Republican form of government. And so the Republican form of governance and the judicial boundaries associated with all those offices is extremely important to getting people involved at the local level and then moving up into the larger realms. And so I think transparency and accountability are the key to success in getting people to realize the power of their vote.
Thank you, Senator Linthicum. This will be our last question for the night. The Secretary of State has flexibility both in terms of what they choose to audit and what recommendations to issue as a result of any audit. As Secretary of State, what considerations will you make when choosing the subject of an audit, and how will you prioritize equitable outcomes when issuing any recommendations? Senator Linthicum, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. To begin with, conducting regular audits is a requirement. It actually helps every business on your main street, whatever city or county you reside in. Those businesses get regulated to ensure compliance and to optimize their resource allocation. It helps them understand their own books and their own management style. And I would take that into the public sector and make a sensible approach for ensuring effective governance and accountability by auditing departments like the Education Department, Environmental Quality, DEQ, and the Water Resources Department, Transportation and Justice. All of these departments affect everybody equally across the state. And then there are those departments where children are tied up in custody and family, and the Department of Health and Human Services and the services that they provide. These are specialized agencies, and they are extremely they're extremely close to the problems that we see in, for example, in Portland, such as housing, human health, fentanyl, the crisis of cartels, and those kinds of maintaining the public welfare institutions that we have within the streets of the Portland and Multnomah County areas. So conducting comprehensive reviews of these agencies, ensuring visibility and transparency throughout the auditing process would foster more trust and reliance and confidence in government operations without increasing reliance on those agencies. What we want to do to create prosperity in the hearts, minds, and families that live within our urban and rural areas is help them become self-sufficient and help them move themselves out of the domain of needing public service and public oriented handouts, because handouts can be a great safety net, but we want to move people into independence. Once they become independents and they're running their own lives and their own families, their hard work now pays off, and there's a big return on investment as each of those individuals breaks free from dominance of government control and lives their life to the fullest extent possible.
Thank you, Senator. Treasurer Reed, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in Oregon right now is to match our good intentions with good execution. And that's what excites me about the power of the audit function in the Secretary of State's office. We should not be using the audit power as a weapon. We should not be governing that based on predetermined political agendas or by anecdotes. I think we need a really robust system of assessing risk and making sure that we're getting the most for our audit buck. For me, there are 3 criteria here. The first is where we are spending a lot of money and not getting the results that we want. A good example of that is the issue of homelessness and affordable housing. A second consideration is where we might have a history of performance that doesn't live up to our standards. That might be information technology as an example. The third one for me is the places that the state steps in and takes a direct responsibility for the well-being of an Oregon life or individual Oregon lives. I'm thinking here about the foster care system or people who are incarcerated. These are just examples, but I hope they give you a flavor for how I would think about these things. It's clear to me that we will not have the capacity in the audit division to match the appetite or the need for potential audits. And so it's especially important to build a system that engenders confidence and credibility in the audits. As a final matter, while the responsibility for deciding and conducting audits rests with the Secretary of State's office, in the vast majority of cases, the decisions that might stem from findings in those audits are not in the Secretary of State's office. They might be in the legislature or with a school board or a city council. So I think it's really important that there is a deliberate and intentional strategy to make sure that those findings are in front of decision makers so that they can be acted on and that we can set up much more of a virtuous circle of delivering good outcomes and improving the experiences that Oregonians have as they are interacting with their government at all levels. The audit function goes wherever state money goes, so it's not just state programs. And I want to make sure we are laser focused on improving outcomes for Oregonians based on a rigorous system of risk assessment, not on the last thing that someone might have said in the hallway.
Thank you.
Thank
We
you.
will now conclude with closing statements from the candidates. Beginning with Treasurer Reed, we can begin now. You have 2 minutes.
Thanks very much. I want to just end where I began in some ways, and that's with a sincere thanks to all of you for the opportunity to have this discussion about what is a really important office at a really important time. I feel incredibly lucky to be an Oregonian. I'm an Oregonian by choice, having come here for college and stuck around. And a large part of the reason that I am here is because we have so much potential in Oregon. And yet I think we have work to do to make sure that people are confident in our systems, in our ability to execute. And the Secretary of State's office is at the center of so many of those questions. To make sure that we are defending the way we conduct elections in Oregon, that prioritizes eligible people, Senator, eligible people participating to the maximum degree that they are allowed, and having confidence in the results. That audits are conducted in ways that maximize the returns that people see and feel and have confidence in. That we're making it easier for businesses to start in Oregon and succeed in Oregon and hire people. That the archives of Oregon are accurately reflecting the full story of this place that started to be called Oregon at some point in time, and before that had a rich history, and since that probably doesn't tell the full story in the archives. We've had 4 secretaries of state in the time that I have been treasurer, and I think that instability has really distracted the office from its core missions. And I want to bring back stability and professionalism so that the people of Oregon can have confidence in the Secretary of State's office and in government more generally. I'd be honored to have your vote, and I appreciate the time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Treasurer. Senator Linthicum, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. It's been a good evening. You can tell we've had a robust discussion and different opinions about various things. And the irony of these discussions is we miss the primary object of government is to defend the rights of the individual person, to defend the rights of that individual, their right to make their choices, their right to be involved, their right to have free speech, freedom of conscience, and the freedom to voice their grievances and make their choices. And so government isn't here to be, quote, government. And I don't think we should be pressing the object of government as being one of keeping everybody satisfied with their government. I think the government right now is a primary object that needs to be reviewed with a clear perspective. We need to be diligent. We need to be rigorous. We need to be have a speculative concern for how is government actually treating the criminal on the street? How is government treating the man who is in prison? How is government treating the underserved and those who are in impoverished neighborhoods? These are all important areas, and the Secretary of State's office is to ensure that the system we have for people to voice their concerns and voice their choices is maintained so that the integrity of their free choice is the primary goal of government. So thank you for tonight. I look forward to further debates, and thank you for your vote.
Thank you both for your participation tonight. As tonight's candidate forum ends, I want to thank our partners at LNS Captioning and Open Signal who are airing this forum. We thank Mr. Reed for participating tonight and our community, we thank both Treasurer Reed and Senator Linthicum for participating tonight and our community partners. I also want to again highlight the importance of voting. The deadline to register to vote for the election is October 15th, and election day is November 5th. Democracy only works when people vote. So get registered if you aren't, and vote. At the Urban League of Portland, much of our work is done with local partners who have our deep commitment to our shared values. We would like to thank the following partners: Reimagine Oregon, the NAACP of Portland, Fair Housing Council, SEIU 49, Welcome Home, the Coalition of Black Men, Kairos, Muslim Educational Trust, Women's Foundation, the YMCA, Impact Northwest, Children's Institute, NEA, Latino Network, the Northwest Pilot Project, and Self-Enhancement Incorporated. In closing, please remember that the Urban League of Portland is a nonprofit that relies on donations and memberships to serve the community. It is through your generosity that the Urban League of Portland can host forums and other events like this. Again, tonight's event was part of the Urban League's series of virtual candidate forums for the primary election. Please visit ulpdx.org to learn more about our series of events. If you need assistance voting or registering during the election season, staff at the Urban League are ready to talk with you. Reach out via our website, social media, or call 503-280-2600 for assistance. On behalf of the Urban League of Portland, President Nikenge Harmon Johnson, the Board of Directors, and all our members, I thank you, our audience, for joining us tonight. I am Justice Raji, Executive Director for Reimagine Oregon. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, and thank you.